Good evening and welcome, everybody. My name is E.R. Anderson. I'm the executive director of Karis Circle, and Karis Circle is the nonprofit programming arm of Karis Books. Karis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore located in Decatur, Georgia. We are obviously not coming to you live from Karis Books. I wish we were getting to gather together in real time, but we are very excited to be able to host a virtual event tonight with Deesha Philyaw and Tamara Winfrey-Harris. This event is co-sponsored this evening by the Auburn Avenue Research Library on African American culture and history. I'll be dropping the link to Auburn Avenue in the chat. You can check out all of their digital resources. There's a ton of stuff you can do while the library is physically closed. Check out the archives, check out the videos. Be sure to patronize the library, even though you cannot physically go there right now. It's an amazing wealth of resources that we have in Atlanta, and we're very proud to be in partnership with them. So tonight we're here to celebrate the Secret Lives of Church Ladies. It's a book that has been honored already quite a bit. So I want to introduce our two conversation partners. First, I'm going to introduce Tamara. So Tamara Winfrey-Harris is an author who we've hosted at Karis and are going to host again, probably virtually, but one way or another. So Tamara's writing on race and gender has appeared in the New York Times, The Atlantic, New York Magazine, Los Angeles Times, Bitch, and other media. She is the author of the award-winning book, The Sisters Are All Right, Changing the Broken Narrative of Black Women in America, and the forthcoming Dear Black Girl, Letters from Your Sisters on Stepping into Your Power, which comes out in March 2021 and is already available for pre-order from Karis. So I'll be dropping that link in the chat as well. And she's here tonight to interview her friend and, maybe quiz her on all manner of things. Y'all aren't ready yet. I'm just going to tell you. Get ready. Deesha Philyaw, debut short story collection, The Secret Lives of Church Ladies, focuses on Black women, sex, and the Black church. Deesha is also the co-author of Co-Parenting 101, Helping Your Kids Thrive in Two Households After Divorce, written in collaboration with her ex-husband. Her work has been listed as notable in the Best American Essay series, and her writing on race, parenting, gender, and culture has appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, McSweeney's, The Rumpus, Brevity, Dead Housekeeping, Apogee Journal, Catapult, Harvard Review, ESPN's The Undefeated, The Baltimore Review, Two Night, Ebony, and Bitch magazines, and various anthologies. Deesha is a Cambilio Fiction Fellow and a past Pushcart Prize nominee for essay writing in full-grown people. So I want to welcome you both here. We're so happy to have you. And I just want to let folks know, as you are listening, you're just going to go ahead and buy this book if you haven't yet. So the green button to do that is just down at the bottom in the center. Just click on that at any time. Right next to that is the ask a question button. It is not disruptive to ask a question at any time. Just go ahead and pop that in there. You're not going to bother anybody. You also are welcome to shout out anything. I see Tiffany's already say she loved the book. Go ahead, put in there. If you love the book, if you already read the book, you can say where you're writing from, watching from. We love to have a robust chat. So make yourselves at home. We're so glad you're here, and enjoy. You're in for a treat.
Thank you.
You.
Tammy.
Deesha. So no one likes a braggart and a name dropper.
Okay.
But I have been bragging and dropping your name all over the place for the last several weeks.
You can do that.
I am so honored to know you. And I am special for those of you watching. I had a chance to watch as this book developed, and I got a chance to read some of these stories very early on. I got a chance to read Peach Cobbler before it was Peach Cobbler. And it is a joy, and it is transformative to read this book anyway. But I think it's even more special reading it, knowing where it started. And I am so proud of you, my friend, and I am happy for you.
Thank you so much, Tammy.
So I thought I would start by asking, can you tell us a little bit about your journey writing this book? When did you start? How long did it take? What was the journey to seeing Secret Lives come to fruition?
So the collection is actually a detour. I've been working on a novel that has a preacher's wife as the main character.
Mm-hmm.
And I started that novel in 2007 and got about 2/3 of the way done. And about maybe 4 years ago, I was stalled and I started writing some short stories. And my agent had come to some readings that I'd done of the short stories, and she had been, she's been waiting years now for the novel. And she said, I really like these church lady stories. That's, she called them that. I wasn't really, didn't see the connection. And she said, and I know you're, taking a little break from the novel. Maybe while you're doing that, you could work on a collection of these church lady stories. Maybe that would feel a little less daunting than the novel, and just, give you a little break from it. And that did, just right there, it sounded, even though it's not easy to write a collection of stories, to me at that moment, it felt more possible and more doable than finishing this book. And she had the idea that if I could write 3 stories and get 3 stories published, on the strength of that, she could market the book as a partial manuscript and we could go forward. And so that sounded like something I could do. And so then I got really intentional. So I hadn't thought of them as church lady stories, but clearly there's a thing with me and sex in the church. And it was showing up not only in the novel that I had been working on, but it was showing up in those first 2 stories. And so then I decided to continue working on stories, but making sure that each one either had a church lady or what I call someone who is church lady adjacent. So the person may not identify as a church lady, but there's someone influential in her life who is. And so over the next, couple of years, I'm sorry, let me think about that. Maybe it was 1 or 2 years from the time I had that conversation, sold the 3 stories, and then we started to shop the manuscript last year. And then the manuscript sold. And there was a really quick turnaround to finish the book because West Virginia University Press was really excited about it, and they wanted my book to be the lead for their fall 2020 catalog. So that meant I had to really get writing. So the last 4 stories in the book were written in a very compressed amount of time, about 5 weeks. But some of them, it's not like I started them right then. There had been, maybe there were 10 pages done, and maybe I wrote those 10 pages a year before, but I, pulled them out of, the dungeon and wrote them. And then there were others that, like Dear Sister was one that I started once the book sold. So they're kind of all over the place, where the newest story would have been written last year, and the oldest was maybe written, started 4 years ago.
Peach Cobbler was the first, right?
Was it Peach Cobbler or Eula? Eula was the first one that got published. Peach Cobbler actually never got published outside of my book. It got rejected a bunch of times. So let that be a lesson. Writers, don't be discouraged. The book, the story that gets rejected the most can be one of the most popular in your collection. I don't remember which one I wrote first.
It feels like it was Peach Cobbler.
You would know because you had to read them all.
So Peach Cobbler was the one I remember reading first and thinking, this is amazing, and this is going to be fantastic.
Thank you.
Would you mind reading a bit from Peach Cobbler?
Sure.
So people can get a feel for where you started?
Yeah. Okay, let's see here. I'm going to read the first 2 paragraphs in Peach Cobbler.
Awesome.
My mother's peach cobbler was so good, it made God himself cheat on his wife. And watching, close enough to have memorized all the ingredients and steps by the time I was 6, but not too close to make her yell at me for being in the way, and not close enough to see the exact measurements she used. She never wrote the recipe down. Without having to be told, I learned not to ask questions about that cobbler or about God. I learned not to say anything at all about him hunching over our kitchen table every Monday, eating plate after plate of peach cobbler and then disappearing into the bedroom I shared with my mother. I became a silent student of my mother and her cobbler making ways. Even when I was older and no longer believed that God and Reverend Troy Neely were one and the same, I still longed to perfect the sweetness and textures of my mother's cobbler. My mother, who fed me TV dinners, baked a peach cobbler with fresh peaches every Monday, her day off from the diner where she waited tables. She always said Sunday was her Saturday and Monday was her Sunday. What I knew was that none of her days were for me.
What I love about this book, well, primarily that it's so much about Black women and that you write so lovingly, but also honestly about Black women and all of our facets, including how we love and how we don't. And I feel like that comes through in that story. And I want to talk more about Black women, but first I want to talk about the church.
Okay.
Because you got to talk about the church if you're talking about Secret Lives of Church Ladies.
Yes.
So you pushed back on me, but I said it felt like Black religion was the main protagonist in this story, or at least it's the protagonist. Because, I mean, to your point, it rubs up against everything. It's, you know, the church is heavy in all of these women's lives. So what attracted you? Why this book? You said you have a thing for the church, also sex. We'll get to that. Yeah. But why religion? Why the church? Why the Black church specifically?
I think it's because for so long, church was so central to my life. For as long as I could remember as a child, I went to church, and more particularly, I was sent to church. So I was raised by my mother and my grandmother, and they didn't go to church until I was in college. But when I was younger, they would send me. Like, I learned very early on, you were supposed to go to church. And then I learned all of the, you know, good, bad, heaven, hell stuff, which for a kid, you know, and a kid like me who, you know, I was very much wanting to go to heaven and wanting to, you know, I was, you know, a good student and all of that. I wanted to get things right. And so the church was my introduction to, this is how you're supposed to be in the world. And this is how you're supposed to live. And there are all these rules. And I was quite the rule follower. So for a while, you know, church was like right up my alley. But then, you know, puberty hit. And all of a sudden, it's like, wait a minute, you know, what is this about? You know, and so all these things you're not supposed to do and you're not supposed to feel and you're not supposed to think about starts to bump up against what I now know is like, you know, human development. And so I got very curious about other, you know, the women around me, the women in the church and the women outside of the church. And, you know, they were like the blueprint for what I could be. And so what were my options? And the church is full of those kinds of binaries. You know, you're going to be good or bad. You're going to heaven or hell. You're going to be this kind of person or that kind of person. And so, you know, I was really intrigued, frightened, you know, fascinated, curious, trying to figure out, well, who am I going to be? And who are these women? You know, do they like sex? You know, I mean, because at first it was, do they have sex? Well, if they got kids, I know they have sex, but, you know, what about the ones who aren't married? Are they having sex? Are they enjoying it? Do they masturbate? You know, I had all these questions at that really critical age. And so I think because I was in the church at such a critical time in my development, those sorts of questions just stuck with me as I did become a woman. And I was someone who married early, and, you know, those questions stayed with me about, you know, who can I be? Who am I allowed to be? And the, you know, those binaries and the answers that the church gave just didn't fit. And so my initial writing of fiction came from wanting to write about my own dissatisfaction, my own questions, my own secrets, but not daring write it as nonfiction. And so, you know, my first impulse around fiction was to write about dissatisfied women who were boxed in by, you know, the choices that they thought were available to them.
Were you at church? Would you call yourself a church lady?
I was until I was like 35. Yeah.
Because it's interesting because the title or whatever church lady brings to mind, like very pious, very rigid, very chaste. But these women aren't that.
Right. And neither are the church ladies that you're thinking about, right? That's you know, that's the gag, is that, you know, they're fully realized people, and you know, we just see them in at different levels of living, as you know, living fully. But you know, like all of us, they've got secret selves, they've got, you know, sides to themselves that they don't show. But I think for a lot of Black women in the church, it's you know, maybe they're less likely to show it where you can see it. But then, you know, I was talking to somebody and they were remembering growing up in the church, and that there were church women who, as soon as church was out, they run outside, step off the property and smoke, you know, that, you know, so, you know, those kinds of, you know, how much do they want to reveal? And so for me, these stories were, well, what are their interior lives, and what are the secrets? If we could see inside their lives, what would that look like?
Well, I wonder, you know, as you were saying that, I wonder if Black women's relationship with religion in the church is more fraught than some others, say white counterparts, because I'm thinking of, you know, Black women, because of racism and sexism, are accused of being exactly the opposite of what we are supposed to aspire to in church ladydom. You know, stereotype would have us not being feminine, not being submissive, not being chaste, all of the things that I would say wrongly. You were told we have to be a church lady. So you think this kind of fraught relationship with religion is part of Black womanhood?
So I would say it is more so, to the extent that let's go back to this idea of church lady adjacency, right? So even if we as adult women are not actively in church, we probably are maybe two generations away from a church going family. Whereas, you know, I don't have the statistics on this, but I'm pretty sure Black folks are more churched than white folks. I'm not sure. You know,
that is true.
That is true. Okay. Yeah. So if you are a white woman, you know, if you're not going to church now, there's a pretty good chance that you're not one or two generations, that's just your heritage, you know, that you aren't living adjacent to these ideas. Now, all of us are living under Madonna whore, all of us, you know, so there are certain things that permeate the larger culture, but to the extent that it's our, you know, that culture is being transmitted, say, from our mothers and our grandmothers, and if we're more, you know, our families are more likely to be rooted in the church, then more so than our white woman peers are going to still, you know, if nothing else, we've got something to unlearn, right? You know, whereas they may not have been burdened with it in the first place.
So the other thing that I love about this book is the relationships between women. And even as you're reading those, you know, paragraphs about Peach Cobbler, and I think of watching my mother, my grandmother, you know, needing the crust for the peach cobbler, and make
best part.
Like that is the Southern cooking, like the put in the love in it, and the no measuring, and the all of those things. Tell me a little bit about the relationships in the book, because they are loving, they are dysfunctional. You have the dysfunctionalness of Peach Cobbler and Jael. And then you have like the lovingness of like Snowfall. Talk a little bit about how you rendered Black women's relationships.
I think just, you know, drawing on my own life and on women that I know, and, you know, and you'll notice there's a lot of mother-daughter stuff. And so for many of us, those are these very complex relationships where there's a lot of love. There's also that generational trauma. There's also, you know, and then there's also the search for love, you know, the search for, you know, intimacy and things like that. So I think the stories reflect all of those different roles we play as mothers, as daughters, as lovers, trying to get free. If there's a thread that runs through it all, I keep going back to those binaries, like, you know, I can be this way or this way in the world. I can forgive when Eddie Lavert comes, you know, does she you know, what kind of relationship is she going to have with her mother? You know, does she have to forgive her, you know, or is there some place in between where, you know, it's not necessarily forgiveness, but it's something else. It's not unforgiveness. It's not forgiveness because her mother's, you know, not even able to engage with her. So it's all of the ways we navigate the binaries that can be confining to us in our relationships with other women or other people.
I think I know the answer to this, but do you see yourself in any of these characters?
Yeah, in quite a few of them. You know, some of the things that unlearning that I talked about, you know, I couldn't have the characters unlearn unless, you know, I had unlearned some of these things myself. The mother-daughter threads that run through a lot of the stories, that was not intentional. It was after I turned in the manuscript and I was looking back, I was like, there's a lot of mother-daughter stuff.
Really?
Not surprisingly. Yeah, you know, clearly when I have things to work out, this is where they show up. But, you know, as you know, I lost my mom in 2005 to breast cancer. And there were things that we were able to resolve before she passed away. But you know, I still think of that relationship as unfinished business. Like there was so much more that I wish we could have experienced together, and a lot that we healed a lot, but there was a lot that went unsaid. And I think if I show up in this book, it's when the people who are daughters get to say things that maybe I didn't get to say to my mother.
Wow.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the sex part.
Okay.
Why did you
Lego?
Why was it important for you to write these women's sex lives so frankly? I mean, like as you said, when people think church lady, they think chaste. And I love how in Jael, she's looking at the first lady and thinking, I know she's pretending to be all prim and proper, but I know what's going on.
She was wearing booty shorts, yes. Yeah. You know, it goes back to what we said earlier about, you know, writing the sides that we don't always see, but we know are there. And I think again, the church ladies really imprinted on me during my time of puberty, where, you know, I thought about sex all the time, you know, or don't have sex. What are the consequences of having sex? All of the horrible things that could happen if you had sex. But then because I was going through puberty, having sexual desires. And so it was a very confusing time. Again, it took that with me into adulthood and writing. When I started to write, those were the things I was curious about, but felt like, you know, I can't write about these things. And then, you know, once my mom passed away, I also got divorced. My mindset was almost like a go hard or go home. You know, my mother passed away without having done all of the things, or probably many of the things that she wanted to do. And it just reminded me, like, I don't have time to, you know, play small or play for other people's comfort. I'm curious about the sex. I'm interested in those things. So I'm going to write about them, and everybody will be okay. They'll live, you know.
I'm wondering if you feel like the Black church is on the whole limiting for Black women. Because when I think of the characters in your book, it seems like the effect of religion is overall not a positive one. This isn't a book where I found God and now I'm liberated.
Yeah. So, you know, first I do want to give a nod to, you know, the many, you know, Black women, and also, you know, Black pastors, theologians of all genders who have a liberation theology, who are not, their understanding of God in the church is not what you see in my book. So I want to, you know, give a shout out to them and recognizing them. But when we think about the Black church and the way that many, or if not most of us, were churched, it is in these very kind of confining ways. And yes, it's particularly oppressive for Black women when you see that, you know, we are the vast majority of church members, but not church leadership, you know, and why is that? And so a system that has you overrepresented in general, but underrepresented in leadership, that's not a system that's designed for you to thrive. But I would never say to somebody, you know, a Black woman who was heavily involved in the church, you know, if she's finding what she needs in church and through her faith, I respect that. But we know large, you know, on a macro level, but also for some of us individually, that isn't always the case. You know, so I am allowing for, you know, people having their individual experiences of church and of God. But I know for myself and for many other Black women, there were times when the church was not a source of comfort. It was a place of constriction. And so that's not to, you know, minimize other people's experiences of it. But, you know, good fiction is where the conflict lies, where it's messy, you know.
Right. Would you mind reading a little bit from Snowfall for us?
Oh, okay. Yes. I have a favorite passage in this one.
Ooh.
So Snowfall, for folks who have not read it, it's a story of two women. Arletha and her girlfriend Rhonda. They left the South and they moved to a colder place and aren't adjusting well to it. And they also left behind their families. When they chose to be in a relationship with each other, they lost their families. We were born and raised in warmer places, Georgia and Florida. Warmer too in the residual charm, polite smiles, and gentility of the white people whose ancestors owned ours. In the South, the weather does not force tears from your eyes, causing the faces of passing strangers to register worry about you for a millisecond. It's the wind you want to tell them, but a millisecond is not enough time. In the South, the weather does not hurt you down to your bones or force you to wake up a half an hour early to remedy what has been done to your steps, your sidewalk, your driveway, and your car as you slept. But the South has hurricanes, they say. Yes, but not damn near daily, not for a full quarter of the year. You tell people up here that you're from the South, and 9 times out of 10, they say the same old thing. I'm sure you miss the sunshine. Rhonda and I both miss taking sunshine and easy morning commutes for granted. But what we really miss are the laughter and embrace of our mothers and grandmothers and aunties, kin and not kin. We miss the big oak tables in their dining rooms where, as kids in the 70s and 80s, we ate bowl after bowl of their banana pudding as they talked to each other about how much weight you'd gained, like you weren't even there. We missed helping them snap green beans and shell peas sitting at their kitchen tables, watching The Young and the Restless on TV perched on the pass-through. We missed how they loved Victor Newman, hated Jill Foster, and envied Miss Chancellor and how she dripped diamonds and chandeliers. We missed their bare brown arms reaching to hang clothes on the line with wooden pins. We missed their sun tea, brewed all day in big jars on the picnic table in the backyard, then later loaded with sugar and sipped over plates of their fried chicken in the early evening. We miss lying next to them at night in their 4-poster beds with 2 soft mattresses covered by iron sheets and 3-generation-old blankets. We miss their house coats, perfumed with absorbing junior liniment and hints of the white shoulders they'd spritzed on from an atomizer that morning before church. We missed tracing the soft folds in their skin when we held hands and watched our favorite TV shows in their beds. Dallas, Dynasty, Knots Landing, and Falcon Crest. We miss how they laughed and were easy with each other, how their friendships lasted lifetimes, outlasting wayward husbands and ungrateful children. Outlasted that time Alma caught Joe cheating, and she whacked him on top of the head with the sword he brought back from the war, but he told the people at the hospital he didn't know who did it. Outlasted having to hide your medicine bottles in your shoes because otherwise 7 of your 9 children were liable to steal them. We miss how they seemed to judge everyone but themselves. Or maybe that judgment was in the nerve pills they procured from the Chinese doctor on Bay Street, who didn't ask questions. We miss their furtive cups of brown liquor on Friday and unabashed cries for Jesus come Sunday. We miss their one gold tooth that made us wonder who they had been as young women. We miss their blue crabs, the shells boiled to a blood red in wash tubs atop bricks over makeshift fires built in the yard. The wash tubs reminded us of cauldrons full of rock salt and cayenne-drenched water bubbling and rolling, mesh bags of seasonings and halved onions and peppers floating on top, along with potatoes and ears of corn. We miss how they stood over those cauldrons like witches stirring a potion, with sweat beading on the tips of their noses and smoke swirling around their hands and wrists. They wielded long-handled spoons to press the frantic, flailing crabs toward their deaths. We miss how they made our Easter dresses and pound cakes and a way out of no way. But we lost all those things when we chose each other. Only the memories remain, which is why, even though we grew up in different places, so many of our bedtime conversations start with, "Remember when?" As we lie there in the dark with our nostalgia and nothing to distract us from it, not even each other, not anymore.
You're such a good writer.
Thank you.
There's just, I love that passage. Like there's just this feeling of recognition that I have as a Black woman and a descendant of the Great Migration. And there's also this feeling of melancholy in the words and sadness, their memories. And I feel like there's a lot of that in the book. There's melancholy and there's sadness and there's tragedy. And I wonder if you feel like that is part of Blackness, Black womanhood.
I mean, we know scientifically it's in our DNA from, rooted in our past enslavement. We know that. But on a more personal level, as I mentioned earlier, I started writing fiction from a place of dissatisfaction, from a place of my own melancholy, from a place of my own longing. And so, if that's our kind of our inheritance in a way, that's also part of that unlearning, that while there's that part of who we are as Black people, there's also the fullness of who we are as Black people. There is also our joy. There is also a level of resilience that we should not have to have, but we do. And so we are all of those parts, not any one more than the other.
See, that was my next question, but you stepped on it, Deesha. Because this book is also funny. I mean, Black people are funny as hell.
Yes.
Black women are funny. If you don't
Truly
believe me, head over to Black Twitter. Was there anything in this book you were writing? And I know as a writer, there are these moments, humor that you injected in where you were like, "Oh, that's pretty funny." Wait till they read
everything that made it in the book. If it didn't make me laugh every time I read it, it had to go, So, okay, one of my favorite parts, one of my favorite lines is in Dear Sister, where Uncle Bird is talking to the narrator and talking about her father and telling her a story about her father and how, you know, he and his brother were, you know, they clown each other, they make fun of each other. And Uncle Bird's and the father, as you know, in this character has 5 daughters with different women, with like 4 different women. And he says to him, you know, you're the only man I know that when somebody asks how many kids you have, you say 5 and a possible, or it's like a spades hand, like big spades, 5 and a possible.
And can't you, like, I could see it. You can see the men standing out back with the 5th in the brown bag. And man, you're the only person, like, you could see, you could hear the cadence, you could see the man,
yeah,
you could feel it.
Yeah.
You know? I love that. So again, like, this book is about so much duality, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's saint and sinner, it's sadness and humor, it's all the duality of our life.
Yes, yes.
And the South. So why was, you know, it took me a while when you started talking about the book as a Southern book and the attention it had gotten from Southern communities. It took me a while to realize, oh yeah, I guess it is maybe set in the set in the South. So was that important to you? Was that another part of you coming out as a Southern girl? So, you know, as a member of the Southern diaspora, sometimes I don't recognize uncut Southernness from the motherland because it's so much a part of Blackness.
Yes.
You know?
It's hard to say what, you know, what's what. And I'll speak for myself, but I think it's true for a lot of Black Southerners. We just, certain things we associate as Blackness that are Southernness. And so part of, you know, life is learning, like, you know, that there are these multiple facets to it. Right. And sorry, I have a dog that wants attention right now.
as we've discussed, the whole Miss Tamara thing that
calling Miss
Bird's my host is a Midwesterner.
Yeah, I mean, it's still something that, like, when my kids went south, I had to teach them to say yes ma'am and yes sir and not just yes. Like we were good, we don't say yeah it's not okay. But they would just say yes. And one of my mother's neighbors was very upset with one of my children because she did not say yes, ma'am. And she fussed at her. And I was like, you're never going over there again. You know, because I was like, she's a little kid. But yeah, exactly. But no, those are the kinds of things. And like when I realized, you know, there were older white people that I would encounter, whether in work situations or other situations. And I'm like, I'm not going to call them Miss. Like, I'm just not going to do that, you know, not going to happen. But there are people who would do that. Like I mean, that's just how deeply ingrained it is. So, yeah.
But I love the Southernness of this book. And so we're debating this, and, you know, some English professor is going to come in and tell me that I'm an idiot. Feel free. But I wondered if this book would rightly be called, in a way, Southern Gothic, because you usually think of white stories, you know, white stories of a certain era. And I know there are no old decaying plantations and things, but there is the element of sadness and violence and Southernism and like these quirky characters and all of that. I just thought it has the charm and the quirk of like a Southern Gothic novel.
Yeah. I would say,
call me Tamara, that's stupid.
No, not stupid. It's not stupid at all. I really like the question. First, I will say this. The epigraph is the last 2 lines of a poem called The Autobiography of Eve. I did not fall from grace, I leapt to freedom. And that's from a collection of poems by a Black woman named Ansel Elkins. And the collection is called Blue Yodel. And that is a Southern Gothic collection. So there's that piece. And I would say of the stories though, the one that gives me Southern Gothic is Jael, because of the violence and how violent and dark it is. Jael for sure.
That's the story that made me think that at first, because as we were going through the success of the daughter struck by lightning, and then the next daughter beaten to death, and that, that's what made me think that.
Yeah, it and I will say the lightning and sort of the idea of Jael and her grandmother being a little murderous. That's a nod to The Bad Seed, which was one of my mother's favorite movies, and is also a book. I didn't know it was a book. Excuse me, but that's a nod to that as well, because Rhoda, the bad seed in that story, she gets struck and killed by lightning. So little nods here and there.
Spoiler.
Oh, sorry.
If you haven't seen that movie in the last 60 years.
Yeah. So, but still watch it. It's a really good movie. And the idea that this sort of inherent evil skips a generation, like I was always fascinated by that. So
I'm excited. In the chat, Susanna Morris endorsed my Southern Gothic question. So I feel real legit.
Good.
So, we've talked about place, we've talked about the South, we've talked about race as it relates to this, and religion. What about time? Because I also felt like this book is very centered on, middle-aged Black women and the girls they once were.
Yeah.
And, even when you were reading that passage, like hearing things like Housecoat and Dallas and, Tom McCann and all of these things made me feel warm and cozy, and like I was like 10 again, and it was 1979. Was there a reason why you said it in our era and the Gen X era instead of say the modern South, or even the distant old-timey 50s and 60s South?
Well, it's that when people say, write what you know, I know those eras. And so even the one there, How to Make Love to a Physicist is set in the present, but the main character is a few years younger than me. Well, she's like 7 years younger than me. But even the ones that are set in the past, it would be those characters in 1985 or 1987. They are the age that I was, at that time, or close to the same age. Because I knew those eras. And also, again, that imprinting for me in my adolescence, I liked revisiting the era when Purple Rain came out. I saw that movie 4 times in the theater. I shouldn't have seen it one because I was not 17. But it was fun to revisit that era and have the character say that somebody looked like Morris Day. Like a girl these days wouldn't say that, but so it was a lot of this book was me indulging things that I'm interested in, and things that, my own nostalgia, my own curiosity, my own dissatisfaction, that stuff was really right.
Is it so, talk a little bit about your writing process, because I'm always fascinated by it. What comes first? Does the narrative and the idea for the story come first? Does the desire to write about the thing you like? Is it a message that you want to impart? Is it like, how does all that come together into all this goodness?
So it varies from story to story. And I would have said it's never a message I want to impart, because until this story that's something I wrote in quarantine, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Because initially when I started writing 20 years ago, writing fiction, it was with a message. And I thought, you know, being a church girl at the time, you know, everything you do is supposed to honor God. And so I thought that if I'm writing and it's fiction, then for it to honor God, everybody's got to end up in church at the end. Like I didn't know what I was doing. Like, just bad fiction. Bad fiction was happening back then because it wasn't being driven by like good storytelling. It wasn't being driven by like a tough question or conflict. It was really just pablum, right? And then over time, when I decided to just be more honest and write about what I was really interested in, it was, again, that kernel of my own dissatisfaction, my own questions about binaries and who am I going to be in the world and what kind of person am I going to be in the world. When I tapped into that, then it got a lot more interesting. So sometimes it's that. Sometimes it is a line that'll come to me based on either something I heard or something I experienced. Like the first line of How to Make Love to a Physicist is something like, how to make love to a physicist. How do you make love to a physicist? You have to do it on Pi Day. I just thought that was clever. And I didn't come back to that story for a year, but I wrote that line because I had met a physicist and I had the biggest crush on him. So I was like, ooh, you know, I was all excited. Well, he didn't have a crush back on me. So, but I still got to write the story and imagine a whole thing, you know, and a lot of other stuff came into play. But that story started with that line. Jael came because I learned about that story in the Bible about the real Jael. And let me just answer. I see Margaret said, did I send him the book? Actually, for How to Make Love to a Physicist, I consulted with him. He knows that he was the inspiration for the story. And there's the whole conversation that the characters have about religion and science. And, you know, and she is the character, Lyra assumes that Eric is an atheist. And I just wondered about that. So I asked this real physicist that I had a crush on. I was like, tell me about your, you know, your thoughts on religion, your religious upbringing, if any. And he was actually raised Catholic. He's not an atheist. And we talked a lot about, you know, what he does believe. And I was just blown away by that. And he also consulted with me on all of the sciencey stuff. Like I read about that black hole event that happened, and it seemed really significant. And I felt like I could bring it into the story, and I brought it into the story. And I thought that I got the science right. And I just asked him if he would like read it and, you know, give me some, you know, tweaks to make sure I knew what I was talking about with black holes and all this stuff. And I did a pretty good job. There was like one little thing that I didn't get. And then when it went to the West Virginia University Press, the editor there talked to somebody in the physics department and tweaked something else to make sure that it was, you know, scientifically accurate. But yeah, he knows, he's read the whole book. He likes the book. You know, he's congratulated me. I thank him in the acknowledgement. So not a big secret. Jael, I learned that Bible story and I tucked it away and then came back to it. And I was like, what if there was a teenage Black girl who somebody gave her that name? What kind of girl would she be? And then it, you know, it kind of went from there for Jael. And then I now 20 years later went back to kind of a message story. And this is the first thing I wrote since Church Ladies, first thing I wrote in fiction, I should say, in quarantine, first fiction since Church Ladies. The whole thing with these kids wearing the shirt, I am not my ancestors, that nonsense. So I wanted to write a story where a girl, a millennial, actually she's probably Gen Z. She's Gen Z and she's an activist, and she and her friends wear that shirt. And one night she is visited by an ancestor who asks her about that shirt. So that was my message story.
It's so good. I get to read all this stuff before you guys do. So good. It is so
always, good. Always. Nothing goes out without you seeing it. Nothing.
Can we go back to that? So the idea of message, and this is like it's hard for me as someone who writes nonfiction, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because very often when I start writing books about Black women and girls, I'm writing it because I want people to know this. This is what I want to tell them. But I know fiction is different. And so, like, for instance, one of the things I loved about this collection was the inclusion of the stories of queer women. Very often when you see collections of stories, you know, Black women are made invisible, queer Black women are made even more invisible. So is that is that intentional? Do you set out saying, I want to include a diversity of women in this story, or is your creative process, you are just a person who includes all of Black womanhood and so it ended up there?
And I used to hate when writers did this, but I realize now it's true. It really is like who shows up, right? And so if we're talking about women, Black women in the church, and the things that they hide from themselves and from the larger world, and the ways that binaries constrict them, there's no way you can do that without talking about queerness. It's just organic to those experiences.
Yeah. Right. I wonder, will you read my favorite?
What's your favorite?
Okay, Peach Cobbler. I was explaining this to Deesha yesterday. So Peach Cobbler is a favorite, but it's kind of like your favorite pair of shoes that you've had for a while, because it was the first story I read, and it was like a few years ago. So now it feels very lived in and comfortable. But when Eddie Lavert comes is one of the newer stories that Deesha wrote, and let me read. And so it's a new favorite. So I asked her if she would read it today.
Yes. Let's see here. This was actually this is the last story in the collection, but it's the next to last one I wrote. And it was one that I had a piece of it somewhere for a while, and then I came back to it. So just for folks who aren't familiar with the story, there's a woman, and her nickname is Daughter, because literally they just refer to her as her function in her family. And her mother, who she's taking care of now, was really harsh towards her as a child, harder on her than she was on her brothers. And now that her mother has vascular dementia, she's taking care of her. So in this part of the story, Daughter is remembering her childhood, the time before her mother got saved and got in the church, and then the time after. Unfortunately, the zeal of the newly converted is bewildering to the children of the newly converted. One Saturday night, you've got every blanket in the house draped over your head to drown out the sound of your mother's headboard banging against your bedroom wall as she hollers her soon-to-be ex-best friend's husband's name. And the next Saturday, she's snatching the softened deck of playing cards from your hands because games of chance are from the devil. Daughter, with the logic of a 10-year-old, thought she could understand how gin rummy might be from the devil, seeing as how the name of the game had gin in it. But what was wrong with Knuckles or I Declare War, her and her brother's other favorite games? Something's changed about Mama AC after church, as Daughter thought of her, like banning cards and men from the house. But some things didn't change. She still told Bruce and Rico to shut their mouths, and Daughter to shut her black mouth if they talked too loudly when her stories were on. And the church was no match for Eddie Lavert. The OJs were still Mama's favorite group, and Eddie Lavert was still her favorite in the group. Mama BC, before church, would tell her friends, Miss Nancy and Miss Legine, Eddie Lavert can have me anytime, anywhere, and any way he wanted, honey. You hear me? And they would all fall out laughing. Mama BC played OJ's albums on Friday nights after dinner if she didn't have a date or a card party to go to. She'd close her eyes, swing her hips, and sing along with the music. Her dance partners, a cool cigarette and a glass of whiskey on the rocks. Johnny Walker Red was her drink of choice. On those Friday nights, Rico played DJ, changing the albums for Mama, while Daughter played bartender, adding ice and more liquor as needed before Mama could ask for it. It was like a nightclub for one, with Mama getting lost in love songs and crying by night's end. Bruce would be out in the street somewhere, staying out long enough to sneak in after Mama passed out on the couch, but before she woke up in the middle of the night to check on all of them and drag herself to bed. As they entered their teen years, Bruce was the one out smoking dope, stealing, and brawling over crap games. But it was Daughter whom Mama warned, "Don't be out there showing your color." On the rare occasions Daughter went out in the evenings. Mama AC still spent her Friday nights with Eddie Lavert, and she needed Daughter around to entertain Rico. Without a cigarette and a glass of whiskey, Mama was free to wave her hands in the air as she sang, much like she did at church. In both places, Mama's nightclub for one and church, she was moved by the Spirit to sway and eventually cry. But over time, Daughter couldn't discern any joy in those tears. Mama's friends, Miss Nancy and Miss Legine, remained in the world, as Mama would say. So Mama distanced herself and soon lost touch. And the ladies at church who had surrounded Mama at the altar that Easter Sunday stopped calling after Mama finished the new members class. Their work was done. They had led the poor unwed mother of three to the living water, as church folk referred to Jesus. But she wasn't their kind of people. Years later, Daughter wanted no part of the church or brown liquor because they had both made her Mama cry.
I love that.
Thank
And
you.
I love, you can tell that you love your characters because you love them enough to make them human. So with all of your scar, like there's a lot about Mama in that story that is unlovable and makes me want to fight her, including the "don't act your color."
Yeah.
People used to say that. And so you rendered her as a full person. You saw the way she was victimized. You saw the way that she made other people a victim. You saw her internalized depression. Damn, you a good writer, Deesha.
Thank you. Thanks.
So, and in case, I don't remember whether ER said this, in case you all weren't paying attention, Secret Lives of Church Ladies is nominated for a National Book Award. National Book Award, Deesha. Oh,
show me.
So tell me about the moment. Tell me how you felt when you found out. I know, but tell the
Okay. So there's getting long listed and there's getting short listed. So and they don't tell you in advance. So, did not know that. It never even occurred to me that I would be nominated. And so I knew when the announcement was being made. I had been following the other announcements for the long list, like for nonfiction and YA and poetry and so forth. I knew the fiction was coming. But when someone reached out and messaged me, I was on a phone call, multitasking, but I looked at Messenger and someone was congratulating me. I didn't know what she was talking about. And then she dropped the link in the chat. I didn't even click the link because I knew what it was when she dropped it. And I just started screaming. And the person on the phone thought I had been attacked. They thought somebody came in the house. And then I had to text my neighbors downstairs because I was like, I'm okay. I was just nominated for a National Book Award. And it was just surreal. And then, but for the short list, then it's going to be October 6th. And I knew what time it was going to be. So I was with my daughters and we were sitting on the couch, and I was on Twitter and Taylor was on the National Book Foundation's site, and she was looking at the New Yorker. We were like just covering all the bases. And at like 10:31, Taylor said, "You got it." And I screamed. And when I did this, I hit Taylor in the face. So I am demonstrative.
In her eventual book of fiction, I'm sure that will appear.
So yeah, I found out when everybody else found out, and was just thrilled, just absolutely thrilled and honored and so grateful. So
what do you think?
Faith, I am never writing a memoir. Or maybe you meant Taylor's memoir.
Taylor's memoir.
Oh, okay, yeah. Oh gosh, talk about mothers and daughters.
So
I hope she's kind.
What do you write about next when you've had a debut collection of stories that are nominated for the National? I believe the Star Tribune of Minneapolis said Deesha Philyaw is a bona fide literary treasure.
Oh, thank you.
Which is what, just so you know, which is what all of her friends have been calling her for the last several weeks.
Yeah, in the group chat, that has been the preface from. I'll take it. I'll take it. You go back to that novel you started in 2007, and well, I will say this: you go back to it and then spend some time thinking about whether this is the next book, or is it the next book because I think I should finish it before I do anything else. And so that's where I am now, is really thinking about, is it still something that I want to write? And I think the answer is yes. It's a very different book than it was in 2007. Shoot, it's a different book than it was in 2019. So,
Are you still into writing about sex in church?
Yes. If this book comes to fruition, it's definitely still church. Not as much sex, but definitely, you got to have a dissatisfied Black woman. I think I'll always be writing about dissatisfied Black women.
Well, I love it because it feels like you write for us. And there is like a line that you said, I'm trying to prompt you to say it because I think it was so amazing. And
I know what you're talking about.
And making it guide my work.
Okay.
Idea. I, as a Black woman, felt like this was a loving gaze of another Black woman on the women in this book. Mm-hmm. And why is that, Deesha Philyaw?
Because Tamara Winfrey-Harris, in this book, the only gaze is ours. Yeah. There's no other gaze. There's no white gaze. It's just ours.
Because how often do we get to have that? And I think I want that is going to be my mantra as a writer.
Yay.
Now I have words to put with that and someone to quote. As our friend Dr. Tiffany Monford Dent always says, cite Black women. So I'll be citing Deesha Philyaw.
Thank you.
So I hope that those of you who are watching, if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. But do you want to play a game?
Sure. I just want to give a shout out. Like, I see so many of our friends. I see Rochelle and Alma and Faith and Tiffany and River. And I don't know who I missed. I'm sorry if I missed anybody, but thank you all for being here.
So I used to watch the Actors Studio, and you know how he used to end with that like fancy questionnaire by this French guy.
Yeah.
I'm not fancy enough to know those questions, so I made up my own. So we are going to play a little bit pious and a little bit naughty.
Okay.
You ready?
All right. Yes. All right. I'm ready.
What is your favorite Bible passage?
Jesus wept. It's
short. Very short. Very short.
The shortest verse in the Bible.
What is your favorite Cardi B lyric?
It actually has Jesus wept in it. Write a verse while at work. I wear off-white to church. Probably make the preacher sweat. Read the Bible, Jesus wept. Well, I don't have bars. Bars. I'm not trying to have bars.
I got where you were going. Well played. Like, it's very hard to get like Cardi B lyric and Bible passage to match. So This is why you're up for a National Book Award.
But Cardi did it. The song is She Bad. So
yeah, that is true. Gospel song that stirs your soul.
Oh. I can only pick one?
Oh, no. Is
Okay.
there more than one?
Yes. Pass Me Not, O Gentle Savior. I'll Fly Away.
Mm-hmm.
And then like way, 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 way back from when I was little, Soon and Very Soon and Going Up a Yonder.
All right. Mm-hmm. Hennessy or Crown?
Crown.
All right. Full 11 a.m. service with the praise dancers or 6 p.m. hour of power?
Oh no, 11 a.m., 6 p.m. I'm back home.
All right.
That's right. Abyssinian Missionary Baptist Church, Tiffany.
All right. Kiss, Marry, Kill, Celebrity Preacher Edition.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Bishop T.D. Jakes, Joel Osteen, and John Gray.
Tammy. Kill, kill, kill.
You want to switch one of them out for Benny Hinn? What do you want?
Okay, wait. No, okay. T.D. Jakes, Joel Osteen, and John Gray. Okay, John Gray be getting it in, so I guess marry him. Ew. I'll kiss T.D. Jakes. It's like kissing your granddad, like on the top of his head, his bald head, and kill Joel Osteen. Thank you, Susanna. Like, she's supposed to be my friend, and that's what she did. I was thinking she was going to say, like, Keith David, like Pastor Greenleaf from Greenleaf. No.
You know, I don't know a lot of pastors.
Even? That's right. You were Googling today.
I was Googling my ass off.
Creflo Dollar. Oh, he has a jet. Like, he could be like Sugar Daddy. Creflo Dollar would be like Sugar Daddy.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Book you're reading right now instead of your Bible.
Yeah. I am reading a book called Crooked Hallelujah by Kelly Jo Ford. Sorry. Mm-hmm. She and I are going to be in conversation together this weekend at the Brattleboro, Vermont Literary Festival, and we're going to be talking about double standards. So,
ooh.
Yeah.
I love. Ooh, Tiffany Dent is trying to sneak in a story, a question on my questionnaire.
Okay.
If you could choose one of the characters. To be in a movie, who would play them? Which character and who would play them?
Oh gosh. This is a tough one. This is a really tough one. I am just loving Anjanou Ellis right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there's a lot that she could do. You know, I can't think of a particular character. But man, I would just love for her to play something. But for Lyra in How to Make Love to a Physicist, Gabrielle Union.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Back to my questionnaire. Thank you. A bite of my blank will make you say, "Oh God." And I don't know what you're thinking, Deesha. That is a completely above board and chaste question.
Okay. All right. Chaste. Give me a second then. Goodness. I cook. I'm a really good cook, so I got to think about this. My peach cobbler, definitely.
So if you guys haven't seen this, on Deesha's website, DeeshaPhilyaw.com, there is a book club kit. And in the book club kit are some recipes from the book, including one for peach cobbler that I really want to try because it's got Hennessy in it. right? Doesn't have some kind of brown liquor.
Yeah, you can put any kind of brown liquor you want. I like to put a little dark rum in there, brandy. I mean, you can do whatever you want. I really want somebody to bring me some white Hennessy back from, they don't sell it in the US, so other in the Caribbean and other places. And apparently that's amazing in Peach Cobbler. So, yep.
I just want to say, Karis, I don't know any other like book interview person that would end on a question about Hennessy. I think I'm awesome.
So much fun talking about sex, alcohol, food.
But I'm not done yet.
Oh, okay. All right.
Picture the living room wall in your childhood home. Got it? Picturing it?
No. No, here's why. I grew up in a shotgun house. We didn't have a living room.
Picture the wall of whatever room in your childhood home.
Okay, a room.
Is there a picture of white Jesus, black Jesus, or no Jesus?
So we didn't have the traditional pictures, but we had these things. They were like, I think they cover up old chimney. You know how the little round thing where the chimney things, those were covered, and they would cover them with these metal plates. And there was a metal plate and it had white Jesus on it. Yeah.
You know, oddly, in the Winfrey home, we had a picture of MLK and JFK in the garage. Like, it was hardly a place of honor, but they were in the garage.
That sounds like a compromise that your parents made. Somebody wanted it inside, somebody didn't want it at all, and so it ended up in the garage. Stovepipe Jesus. That's what it is called, a stovepipe.
Oh, what now? That's a Southern thing. What is that?
ER is saying that it's stovepipe.
Oh.
That circle that had been, by the time I came along, it had closed over because, you know.
I got it.
Yeah.
So lastly, what message would you send all the church ladies that we love? What message would you send to the women in this book and the women who are listening today? Church ladies, church adjacent ladies, and heathens. Oh, good Lord, Susanna. They had white Jesus, MLK, Malcolm X, JFK.
So, okay, this is what I'll share this anecdote to answer your question. So I was talking to Kim Lett, who I was just on a guest at her book club group recently, but we talked months ago. She invited me months ago to be on the book club, and she was telling me, you know, how she felt about the stories and how excited she was. And she was talking and talking and talking. And she's like, and I'm talking so loud, I'm so sorry. And I said, no, don't be sorry. I said, I wrote this so that we could be loud. And so that's what I would just say to all of those women that you named is be loud, take up space, be your full, whole self.
I love that. Be loud. Be loud. I love it. I love you, my friend.
I love you too. Thank you.
This has been so much fun.
Yes.
Yay.
You kept me on my toes too. I was like, oh my gosh, we got church, we got liquor. I don't know what it's sex. Huh?
You should have seen me this afternoon giggling to myself and typing out these questions.
Maniacal laughter. And I've been looking forward to this for months, for all of these months, because I adore you and you have just been such a good friend to me, a good friend to my writing patient. You've read everything I've ever written in life multiple times. So just to be talking with you right now is such an honor and such a treat. So thank you.
Deesha is one of the most generous writers I know. I met her when I was an editor for Anti-Racist Parent back in the day, and Deesha was a writer. But at the time, I had never published anything. Like, I was blogging, but I really wanted to start pitching my writing, and I didn't know what to do. And I knew, like, all I knew was fancy Deesha Philyaw was like getting published in different places. And I didn't know how you do it. So I asked her if she had a few moments to talk to me. And she did. She got on the phone and told me what to do. And she didn't have to. Like, she didn't know me from Adam. But the rest is history.
And you are now published at my bucket list publications. So that's how it goes. And I am so proud of you. I'm so proud of you.
So because ER hasn't come to save you yet, hasn't come back to save you yet.
Bring it. Come on, bring it. You got more questions?
I don't see Dr. Carolyn Strong on this thread today, but she is a mutual friend of ours. And I told her I would not ask her question, but I'm going to ask it. She wanted to know which character in Secret Lives of Church Ladies would be most likely to marry her Boaz, even though he was a Hoaz. And everyone who just heard that knows that Carolyn asked it and knows in exactly what voice she asked it.
And if you're lucky enough to know Carolyn, oh my gosh, you are not surprised by this question at all. So, well, and we got to make sure that people know who Boaz is, right? So, Boaz in the Bible, Boaz in the Bible. He was, a very comfortable, well-to-do guy in the Bible. But the way Boaz was sort of popularized in the last couple of decades, it was for single, usually Black women, but not exclusive. It was an evangelical Christian thing where you don't just partner up with anybody. Right? You don't waste your time on these men who are not the men that God sent for you. You wait on your Boaz. Like, I always get Naomi and Ruth mixed up. I'm pretty sure it was Ruth waiting, and it was her mother-in-law. Ruth was a widow, and the mother-in-law they stayed together even after Ruth's husband died. And then Boaz comes along, and I guess he's got a lot of land or something, and then Ruth and Boaz get together. So there's this whole idea of waiting on your Boaz, waiting on the right man, God's man for you. So Carolyn wants to know, repeat the question again now that we know who Boaz is.
Which one of the characters in Secret Lives of Church Ladies would be most likely to marry her Boaz, even though he's a Hoaz?
Okay. So I think it would be Renee from Dear Sister. Renee is the sister who is very churchy. And even though their father was like a total deadbeat, she, believed that you have to honor thy father and mother because that's what the Bible said. And she was just really in denial about who their father was. And if she got a wild hair and thought that some dude was the dude that God sent, or he told her the right things to make her think that despite any hoeing he might be doing, I could see her falling for that because, the natural order of things is that she should be married. And so she came right to mind.
See, I couldn't have had you too much on your toes. If you were ready to answer that question, you were ready for anything.
Well, it's like you said, like you get to know these characters, like somebody, I was in another interview and it was one of the book clubs, and there was a person in the book club who commented to say that as she was reading Peach Cobbler, she was nervous. She was afraid that the pastor was going to abuse the main character, that's where she thought the story was going. Susanna, yes, Renee would be totally like John Gray's wife. And I love the bless. She would. Oh, that's, and yeah, and so not far-fetched, right? But there was someone who worried that that's what was going to happen to the little girl in Peach Cobbler. And immediately I was like, he would never do that. Pastor Neely, he's a lying, cheating, but he is not and abuse. He would not abuse a child. And I, you know, he's a figment of my imagination, but I knew that about him. And it's not because I had ever thought about it before, never crossed my mind. But because it never crossed my mind, when she said that, I was like, no, that's not him. That's not who he is, you know? And that to say, not because he's a pastor, you know, let's get that. Like, I am not one of those people that's like, because someone is, you can be my friend. It doesn't, and if I can know you, if somebody says I'm not that person, it's like, oh, this person could never do anything like that. But talking about him as a character, you know, it just, I never read him that way. And the same for Renee. I read her as someone who would fall for that. If she thought he was her Boaz, she would put up with all kinds of nonsense to keep it going. And Alma, you thought the same thing. That's so interesting to me.
Yeah, that never occurred to me.
Huh. Yeah. Well, that just shows like these stories, you know, they take on a whole different life when they're, you know, whoever's reading them. You know, we bring ourselves to bear to the story in different kinds of ways. And not that, you know, it's unheard of. You know, there are situations where people are harmed in the book. It's just that in that story, and certainly she was harmed. She just wasn't harmed in that particular way. Yeah.
Thank you so much for spending time with me, and thank you everyone for listening.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much. This was wonderful. I know that we didn't even talk about the beautiful cover of this book, but this is a book that everybody just looks at and it like wants to pick up and touch. So whoever did the art for it is also should be commended.
French flaps, man. French flaps. Like money.
Yes. So, now, if you have a copy of the book and it doesn't have French flaps, it's because we ran out of stock. And once I was longlisted, and they did an emergency print order. And so there's a batch of books that does not have French flaps. But if you order now, you will get French flaps.
So click that teal button down at the bottom right now. We're ready for you. We got books in stock. We ship them right out to you. I also want to let y'all know that we have a really great event tomorrow night. So if you're just fired up, I'm putting it in the chat. Victor Laval is going to be in conversation with P. DeJelly Clark, whose new book, Ring Shout, is amazing. If you are watching Lovecraft Country right now and you're kind of in that frame of mind, this book is very much similar to that, taking historical real things, putting them through the lens of horror and speculative fiction, helping us understand this current moment. So check that out. It's going to be really, really great. And we would love for you to be there. It's also free. Just click that button. The other thing it's my job to do is to let you know that all of our events are individually donor funded. So we know everybody's money is all over the place right now. We're just glad you're here. But if you want to support this work and support our digital platform and all of that, we appreciate anything you're able to do. $1, $5, anything really helps us do this work. And I want to also let you know that we'll be repackaging this with captions, putting it on YouTube. And then you can also share it for folks who are deaf or hard of hearing, and they'll be able to read the words. So we will be figuring out a date very soon with Tammy for her book release in March and celebrating that. But also, if you just go back to the event page, all 4 of their collective books are on that page. So Deesha's first book about parenting and Tammy's first book, The Girls Are All Right, is also on that page. So you're going to want to, it sounds like a lot of friends are here. Maybe y'all have already read those first books. Yeah, at least you should have. But if you haven't, or if you want to buy them for a friend, check those out and come back and see us. We're really, really grateful to have y'all here tonight. This has been a lovely event, and we know that this book is just going to keep on rising, keep on garnering prizes. As it so richly deserves. So thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Have a good night, everybody.
You too.